They shouldn't really be taking this decision without calling a general election, because it would just not be right for them to do what they're reportedly planning to do when they do not have a mandate to do it.
This morning we're focusing on HS2. We spoke to Michael Heseltine earlier. He's written in the paper as well today. He said it'll be just ridiculous if it doesn't get to Manchester. Let's speak to the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You're going to write to the PM, I understand, about HS2. What are you going to say to him?
Two things. Firstly, please, for goodness sake, at least give us the courtesy of a meeting before this decision is made. It's got massive implications for the north of England, whichever way people fall down on it. Nobody can deny that this is huge for our part of the world. But at the moment, we've been completely shut out of the conversation, briefings to newspapers and rumours, and we're just left in the dark, even though we've been working with the government for more than a decade to try and make this work. So, firstly, do not take this decision without at least giving us the chance to have our say. But then, secondly, don't scrap HS2. The reason why we make that very plain is because HS2 builds also the enabling infrastructure for what's called Northern Powerhouse Rail. And if you scrap HS2, you're basically scrapping that east-west line across the north of England as well. And most people here in Bolton, if you were to ask them, would probably say that is the highest priority. So what myself and the leader of Manchester City Council, Bev Craig, will be saying in the letter to the Prime Minister is we are open to a discussion about prioritising Northern Powerhouse Rail and therefore rephasing HS2. But the worst thing in the world would be to scrap it, because that would leave the north of England with Victorian rail infrastructure for the rest of this century, while the southern half of the country has modern high-speed lines. It's a recipe for the north-south divide to become a north-south chasm, if that's what they do.
And what about Labour on this? Because we've had Labour various times, and they're not quite willing to say how much and how strongly they'll support HS2. They sort of say we need to see the final figures. Can you be clear with what your advice to Labour would be? If it is cancelled in the way that it's being implied, is it necessary for Labour to make it a manifesto pledge to bring it back?
Well, what I would say to Labour is the kind of offer I've just put forward applies as well to Labour. I strongly and fervently hope that they're the next government. And we would want to talk to them about making sure that we get both the east-west line and the north-south line. But again, we're open to a discussion about how this can best be done. You look at London and the south of England, and the truth of the matter is it's never been forced to choose between a north-south or an east-west line. Look, it gets everything. Question is, why is it that the north is always expected to choose? Why is the money always running out when it comes to transport in the north of England? Why are people in Greater Manchester treated as second-class citizens when it comes to public transport?
If it does get cancelled, Andy Burnham, in the way that it's being implied, is it then a problem to restart it? If you have to wait an election in, say, a year and a bit, then you have to do lots of other things. Is it possible to restart a big infrastructure project if it is cancelled?
Well, that's my point, Stig. We're saying to the government, don't scrap it, because if they scrap it, you're then delaying new rail infrastructure in the north of England by decades. So that's what we're saying. Whatever you decide, don't scrap it. Leave the protections in place, because if you think about a future where there is HS2 to Birmingham connecting London, you've got the Elizabeth line, you've got all of the investment that's gone on in the southeast. This country will not be leveled up in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the precise opposite would happen. And this is why this is so fundamental. The Conservative Party stood before voters here in Bolton and said, we will level you up. We will invest in the north of England. We will ensure that the north gets the same standard of infrastructure as elsewhere. And if they pull the plug, well, quite frankly, those commitments that they made would be utterly meaningless. And I would say they shouldn't really be taking this decision without calling a general election, because it would just not be right for them to do what they're reportedly planning to do when they do not have a mandate to do it.
Andy Burnham, thank you for joining us today. That's Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester.